in talk radio. Your host, Joe Cristiano.
Welcome, everyone. This morning, we have a special guest. She's calling in from Latin America, and her name is Janet Phelan. She is an investigative journalist. Her articles appeared in many of the nation's major newspapers, publications. She is also now she writes exclusively for the independent media. Her first book was the Hitler Media, the Hitler Poems. The Hitler Poems, and her current book is named Exodus. Exile. I just got corrected. Exile, and we're here to talk to her about her experiences, how she arrived where she is today, her philosophy, and of course the contents of her book. Now, I started reading her book. I didn't have a chance to complete it, but it is spellbinding. I love it. I am right after this broadcast. I'm going home and I'm going to complete reading the book. Janet, thank you so much for being on our program. I'm sorry I'm stumbling all over the place this morning. I apologize for that. Thank you so much for calling in today. Let me ask you, where are you calling from?
I'm in southern Mexico. I'm in Chiapas, the state of Chiapas in Mexico.
Oh, okay. All right. Very good. Someone told me Costa Rica. I have to hit somebody, you know. All right. Very good. How was the weather down there today?
Well, the sun is out today. It's a bit chilly still here in the morning. We're going into the rainy season apparently early this year. So it's usually bright and sunny during the mornings, and then around 2 o'clock, the deluge begins.
Well, we don't imagine southern Mexico's got to be awfully warm, and yet it's not. I guess it.
Chiapas is a mountainous state, and San Cristobal has way up in the mountains. So we have sort of a weather bubble here that we don't experience maybe even 50 miles away because of the altitude.
Oh, I see. How high are you in elevation?
Oh, gosh. I think that's a good question. I think the elevation's around 7,000 feet.
Wow. And you don't get dizzy walking around, do you? At that elevation, I guess you get used to it, right?
There's something called altitude sickness, and I've heard that people do get dizzy when they first come here.
Yeah.
Thank goodness it didn't affect me, but yeah, no, I don't. And actually, I live in the mountains above San Cristobal. So San Cristobal itself is in the mountains, but I'm renting a cabin even higher up. So it's even chillier where I live. I've got a little cabin up sort of in the woods above San Cristobal de las Casas.
Well, if I'm ever walking down that way, I'm going to come and visit with you. Is that okay with
Please
you?
Please do.
Okay.
You
Jenny,
will enjoy the Chiapas coffee. It's excellent.
Oh,
here.
That's great. I love coffee. Well, you have a very colorful career, and you've been through a lot, and so I'm just curious about your perspective of things. You've written many articles. You're a guest on many talk show programs. An author of 2 books, which I applaud, which I don't have the patience to do myself, although I'm not as qualified as you are. Tell us, your latest book, Exile. What was the impetus behind that book?
Right. Exile, I've departed quite a bit from my traditional sort of position as a objective reporter in writing Exile, because Exile is a personal story. It is the story of what impelled me to actually flee the United States. What happened, the involvement of some very heavyweight political actors who are names are named in Exile. And it's basically the story of what happened to me and my family. While it's a personal story, I believe it has profound political implications.
Well,
so
I know
I thought that it was important.
I had an opportunity to read the first portion of your book. Like I told you, said before we got on the air, that we, I didn't get an opportunity to read your book well in advance, and I had to fall asleep on it last night because I had to get some shut eye before the program. But it was. disconcerting that there was not only federal officials, but everyone seemed to be against you. It almost sounded like a horror movie that you can't believe, where no one was on your side and you couldn't even get medical attention when you needed it, and everyone sort of dismissed you. And it seemed like the collusion was so widespread, it was almost like science fiction. And you need to fill in that gap for me.
Right. As I mentioned, I think in the prologue to the book, it's sort of like the net meets the enemy of the state. What happened was that a federal intelligence officer was planted on me and planted on my family, and he's named in the book, and there are actually documents in the book supporting some very underhanded and spurious involvement of him in my family. There are documents, with his signature that are in the exhibit section. So there was actually a federal intelligence operative planted on my family for the purposes of some very, very nasty stuff.
Why would they do that? I mean, why pick on you? They should be picking on me.
Frankly, as I try to make clear in the book, and the fact that you haven't quite finished it, because what I try to do in the book is tell the story. This is what happened, and then at the very end, I'm really trying to make sense out of this, because the fact is, there shouldn't have been any reason for me. I wasn't important. I wasn't significant. I wasn't writing the kinds of investigative journalism that I am now. I was trained as a journalist. I had gone through, the college, the graduate school, and had written for some major publications. But at the time that Jack showed up, I was a person who was beset with medical difficulties. I was not working. I was almost, you could say, a downed calf. So the why Janet question in the book is a question that has to be answered, because Janet was no one of importance. Janet was not significant. Janet wasn't rocking any boats. So the book, the story in itself, I believe, is shocking and disturbing.
It is. It's very disturbing.
The story basically reveals that the U.S. government is planting operatives on non-terrorist, non-threat citizens for the purposes of absolutely terrible things.
Yeah.
Now, we know that Obama is issuing these kill orders on alleged Al-Qaeda operatives who are American citizens who are functioning abroad. Now, this has resulted in quite a bit of concern and flurry, because we do have this thing in the U.S. called due process. If an American citizen is committing a crime or an act of whatever, there are legal processes to go through. Now, there's been a rather significant upsurge in protest against these actions by President Obama. But the fact is that my story proves that the U.S. government is essentially issuing kill orders on American citizens living within the country who are not involved in terrorism. Now, why would this be? Okay, why would this be? And the conclusions that I come to in Exile, I think, are equally as disturbing as the story itself, because the conclusions I'm coming to have to do with what I call demographic targeting. So you have people really people who are in a specific social/demographic group, and these people are essentially targeted for culling. Now, we're seeing this. I mean, this may just sound too shocking for words, but I want to emphasize that we are seeing this already take place in terms of, for example, the attacks on the elderly and disabled through the state court guardianship programs. We have an entire group of people, the elderly and disabled, who are being subject to these guardianships which are essentially depleting their estate, and in many cases involved in sending the elderly and disabled off to an early grave. This is happening on such a widespread basis now that we have national grassroots groups which have sprung up in order to protest this. We have the National Association to Stop Guardian Abuse. We have Americans Against Abusive Probate Guardianships. And in all these cases, we have, a growing numbers of people who are protesting what is happening to their loved ones who may be elderly or disabled,
yes, without
any possibility of redress by the government whatsoever.
Now, Janet, let me ask you, the guardianship program, is this a quasi-governmental program, or you're talking about private guardianship?
Because these guardianships go through the courts and have to be approved by a government official who is a judge, whether or not the guardian is a public guardian or a private guardian, what we have is essentially a government program.
I see.
So because of the involvement of the court.
Okay.
Now, the court, the court is basically there to
I'm sorry, go
oversight.
ahead. We have a couple of people on the line. I just want to, do they want to call in? Do they have a question?
Well, I do believe so.
They do? They do?
Yeah.
All right. Could we take a call? All right. Put
Absolutely,
caller one
yes.
on, please.
Okay.
Caller, you're on the air. Your first name and where you're calling from, please. Caller? Uh-oh.
This is
Caller,
Elliot
you're on the
Bernstein.
air.
Yeah, there he is.
Hello?
Caller, you're on the air. Your first name and where you're calling from, please.
Well, I don't know if you're referring to me, but my name is Elliot Bernstein. If you
Elliot,
can hear.
yes, we're speaking to you. You're on. Okay, Elliot, thank you very much for
Okay,
calling
I
in.
didn't know.
Your comment to your
I
question,
just
please.
called in to listen to the program, but
Okay.
I don't have a question at this point. I might, as she continues her story, I did read most of the book.
Oh, okay. All righty. You have a comment about the book while you're on the air?
Not yet, but I might.
Okay, very good. I'm sorry. I guess we
we
switched you.
I might have some commentary.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Elliot, for listening in, and we'll just put you on hold again. I'm sorry for interrupting it. Thank you very
Okay.
much. Okay. Is the other person they have to press it? No, we're okay. Okay. The other people are on the air, but they're just holding. They're not asking a question. Okay, Janet, I'm awfully sorry. We got a little confused here
No
today.
problem.
This is too difficult sometimes to do. Anyway, okay. Now, what is the book? When you finish reading the book, what are you left with? What are you trying to leave the reader with? Are you?
I'm trying to leave the reader with an enhanced understanding of what the U.S. government is actually doing behind the scenes. We have, on the one hand, the traditional media, which is functioning more and more like scribes.
That's
the
correct.
government says something, they issue an announcement, the traditional mainstream media reports that to us. And then, on the other hand, we have the alternative media, which is probing and digging deeper. And people talk about falling down the rabbit hole, and what that entails actually is not so much falling as really burrowing and digging and looking. And the perspective that is advanced in my book, I believe, reveals a government that is acting more and more as a weaponized mechanism against the American people, while shielding itself with the mainstream media,
Yep.
which is only reporting basically what it's allowed to report.
If
And having
someone
worked
was
in mainstream media, I know this.
well, if someone was uninformed or ignorant enough of the situation, they would consider what you are saying and your experience is science fiction. It's fiction, not science fiction, but it's fiction, almost science fiction, by the way. It would make a great spy novel, if you will, but it wouldn't be real. But we know this is happening. And this is the transition that the American mentality has to make. They have to make the transition from what they believe to be just fiction to reality, and that's a gap that's very, very difficult to fill. It's slow but sure, and I think more and more people, like yourself, are getting to realize that a lot of what we hear is not fiction, but is in fact reality, as much as we do not want to believe it, because there's a self-protective mechanism saying, well, that would happen in Russia, in some other country, but never here. But it is happening here today. And I think your book is trying to tell people that, I suspect, saying, hey, guys, it's here, beware. And I know that we have an increase in the number of people who are leaving the United States, mainly for that reason.
Well, I'm here in San Cristobal de las Casas, Chiapas, where there is a significant expat population. And when I meet someone new who has moved here, I usually ask them, well, why did you leave the U.S.? And I'm hearing, I hear sort of a range of answers. Some people say, well, it was just too expensive up there. Retired people, they just don't have enough money. But there's also a large number of people who are becoming very uncomfortable with U.S. policies, and not only the policies, but the culture.
Right.
The culture that has sort of grown up around the American meme, so to speak, and they prefer to live elsewhere.
Yeah.
So, people are leaving. There are a couple of other situations I want to mention. People I know of who have left, shall we say, under similar circumstances. There's a gentleman named Dr. Joseph Zernick, who was a former college professor, also has a degree in dentistry. He has multiple graduate degrees. And he started researching the courts in California, and he came up on some rather disturbing information, and suddenly Zernick started being stopped by the police and arrested every time he turned around. Now, once again, this is not a street vagrant. This is a college professor, PhD. And I actually got sort of involved. I was working with Zernick at that time, trying to take some of his complex information and put it into a form that, that was more understandable, sort of to people without the advanced sort of technical background that Zernick had. So I was working with him when suddenly he disappeared, and found out he was in jail again, and contacted the relevant officials, and the amount of fraud going on around Zernick's arrests were absolutely stunning. And then suddenly the federal marshals showed up at Dr. Zernick's home in the LA area with their guns drawn.
Yeah.
At which point Zernick hightailed it out of there. So he's now in a foreign country, and also still writing and publishing about courts. And the other situation I want to bring up is there is a investigative reporter named Jeffrey Silverman, who, born in DC, served in the Army, and is now stateless. He is over in the Republic of Georgia, that is, on the Russian border, and has been stripped of his U.S. citizenship without due process. Zernick, you can lose your U.S. citizenship if you commit an expatriating act, like fighting in an army against the United States. Jeffrey Silverman has committed no expatriating act. He is a reporter, and he is now stateless in Georgia because the U.S. has stripped him of his citizenship. So there are similar stories that are coming forward now of people who are being manipulated by the U.S. government in attempts to either shut them down or make life impossibly difficult for them. Simply because they're telling the truth.
I think of one fellow that I follow pretty regularly is Peter Schiff. His of Euro-Pacific Capital and I have tremendous amount of respect for him and his wisdom in the financial markets. And what's interesting is his father is, I guess he's 86 or 87 years old. He's blind, and he's in federal penitentiary for disagreeing with the IRS. Now, what are you doing with a man who's 86, 87 years old, in bad health, blind, and you put him in prison because he's contesting, the IRS? And the man is a very ethical man. I've read his books, the father's books as well. And you said this is a very kind person. This person is logical, kind, and he makes a good point. What danger is he to the public? The answer is no danger at all, but he is a danger to the government, and that's why he's in jail. And I suspect there's a tie-in. Somehow someone felt that you were a danger to the government. Now, maybe someday they'll put me in that category, and I'll be your next door neighbor.
Yeah, come on down. There's lots of room here in Chiapas. I really, I cannot stress enough that what happened to me and also happened to my mother, because there was a twofer going on in terms of this federal agent whose name is Jack Smith. That's the name he's using anyway. There was a twofer going on. And, my situation and my mother's got twinned and tied together in some very disturbing ways. But I cannot stress enough that at that point in my life, I was no danger to anyone. That what happened, I firmly believe it was a result of what I'm calling demographic targeting. Now, however, things change because I don't believe you've gotten to the part in the book where I was physically assaulted by the police.
No,
and I was
did
physically
not.
assaulted and ended up in a coma.
Yeah.
For several days. Now, upon waking up from that coma, I believe is when I became a threat, because you cannot try to kill someone and have them remain, shall we say, friendly and supportive of your interests.
Right.
Once you try to kill them, you darn well better make sure you're successful, because once that person wakes up and realizes what has happened and begins to put one and one together to make two, you do have a potential threat. And the threat may be informational. What I'm attempting to do with the book and with these interviews is to make clear, what a demographic targeting program is, who it may affect, and how in the world is this part of America where groups of people merely on, whatever constitutes their demographic, whether it's racial, whether it's religious, whether it's economic, whether it's disability oriented, that groups of people are going to be funneled off to the hereafter. This is not part of America.
Right.
But it is, and this is my message.
Well,
America
we have
is
300.
not what we know it to be.
We have 300 and some odd million people here in the United States. There's got to be tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, and probably even a few million people who are in your camp, who are protesting. Of course, I'm one of them. I mean, here I am. I'm not a lover of our present government at all. So the government has to pick and choose who they're going to pick on. And somehow they picked on you and they didn't pick on me. Now, why did they pick on you and leave me alone?
Well, that would be a good question, I think, for the NSA.
Yeah, I guess so, yeah.
Really
But do you have any suspicions as to why why they targeted you? You don't seem to be the most dangerous person in the world, other than your words can carry a lot of weight. I agree. And can do irreparable damage if it becomes very popular. And of course, they'd love to make sure that you say nothing, I say nothing, but there's got to be hundreds of thousands of people in our genre, if you will. We're not all being shut up. There's got to be a reason why they eventually keyed on you and not the others.
Well, okay, to some degree, I think I think they had noticed me early on, and they didn't notice me because, once again, because there was anything special about me. They would have noticed me because of the family I grew up in. My father, James Phelan, who passed away in 97, was an investigative reporter on the national scene, and he had written for many years for the Saturday Evening Post. When the Post closed in '69, he went on to write for Playboy, Fortune, Forbes, just A-list. And my father was in a sense, a loose cannon. He followed his own internal moral dictates as to, what stories he chose, how he reported them, and given the level that he was working on, the publications he was writing for, he was a force to be reckoned with. And he covered, in some sense, back in the 60s, one aspect of the Kennedy assassination, which raised all kinds of furor around my father. Even to this day, there are people who are, they're calling him names, he's a Mossad agent. My father was actually a Irish Catholic American, but, people don't seem to really, a lot of people don't really understand the depth of the iniquity that my father uncovered in that reporting. And he also, I believe it was back also in the 60s, effectively derailed Richard Nixon's run for the California governorship when he wrote an article for the Reporter magazine on the Nixon-Hughes loan. My father was, everywhere he went into, he was kind of busting things up. And so growing up, we knew the phone was tapped. Back then, the technology was not very, shall we say, slick. So you'd be on a phone call and you'd start hearing this clicking and whirring and stuff. And so my father at one point made a Freedom of Information Act request for his FBI file. And when it came in, and it was heavily redacted, there was one piece of information in there that was not redacted, not excised, not blacked out. And my father remembered what phone call he made and to whom, where he discussed that. And he threw up his hands and started going down to the corner payphone to make his journalistic calls. Yeah. But growing up with a tapped phone, my whole growing up process, would have been, in a sense, on file with someone that, you wouldn't really want to have that sort of information. So when I began to experience more medical problems and when I became less able to function in any capacity, that would have also been noted. So as I said earlier, I considered myself a downed calf. I was someone who not only wasn't going to cause problems for anyone, but because of my illness had essentially withdrawn from a lot of social activities. So I was just out there. I was low-hanging fruit. I was out there without almost any protection at all. And I think this was the motivation, and this may have been why I was targeted. And I want to say again, some people are, oh, the government came in and they did this and this to me, and it's because I'm telling the truth. No, it happened because I was vulnerable and non-protected, not because I was, in the vanguard of protests. I was at home, nursing a broken life.
But your whole family was on the radar. So,
yes.
It was easy to focus in on you, other than someone who is not on the radar. They have to start from scratch. I can see that. Janet, I find this very compelling. If you can just hold on for one moment, we're going to take a 1-minute break. Don't go away. We'll be right back, okay? Folks, we have Janet Phelan, author of Exile. Fascinating interview. Please stay with us. We'll stop just for a quick station identification and break. Thank you.
You're listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Political talk derived from a historical perspective. Not always palatable, but good food for thought. Pure libertarian talk with host Joe Cristiano. LibertyTalkRadio.com.
Express Test is your go-to company for on-site occupational health testing services. That's right, we said on-site. That means we will meet you at your facility for a free health and occupational safety consultation. Express Test specializes in hearing conservation, respiratory protection, and employee safety. We can help you establish viable programs tailored to your business and employee needs. For your free consultation, call 918-743-2929 or visit us at expresstest.com. That's 918-743-2929 or expresstest.com. Do you find yourself asking, what did you say? Aaron Cristiano of Ranch Acres Audiology has over 25 years of experience helping patients just like you.
Hearing requires conservation. We need to be aware and we need to be responsible for our own hearing health.
Understand more with a little help from Ranch Acres Audiology. Call 918-749-7711. That's 918-749-7711 to learn more. We'd like to thank attorney Constance Squires for her support of Liberty Talk Radio. If you want a comprehensive way to affordably avoid legal issues, call Constance Squires. For a free consultation, call 918-254-9283 or go online at isthyWillDone.com.
This isn't your typical talk radio show. This is Liberty. Liberty Talk Radio.
Phelan, the author of Exile. She's an investigative journalist now living in southern Mexico, we're discussing her book and her plight. And if we can get her on the screen, please. Nope, that's two me. Okay. One me is too much. Two me is much, much too much. Janet, thank you very much for holding on. And Janet, in your writings, you intimate the basic war that the United States has against several fractions in the Middle East. And anti-Semitic would be a word, but that also includes the Arabs, the Aramaics, the Ethiopians, the Jews. It's really not targeted toward any one particular group, but a host of groups in that area. And could you explain how you arrived at that conclusion and why you think that's the case?
That's a very difficult question to answer. It's a very heavy question, Joe. Fundamental to my thesis here in the book, and actually what is impelling a lot of the investigative reporting I'm doing these days, is the perception that the U.S. is being impelled by a demographic targeting agenda. Another word for that would be eugenics. A eugenics agenda can be called a master race agenda, and it generally elevates, in its own hypothetical construct, it elevates one or more groups above others, considers some races to be inferior, etc. And I think that there is ample evidence in both the domestic policies of the U.S. and also the international policies of the U.S. to support concerns that a eugenics agenda is at play. And clearly, the wars in the Middle East are involved in attacking people of Semitic backgrounds, and that does include Arabs. Okay, Arabs. Right. There now, when you get to the issue of Jews, there it becomes even, I believe, more covert and more hidden, because ostensibly, as the mainstream media keeps telling us, the U.S. is a strong supporter of Israel. The U.S. is giving Israel all this money. Well, the U.S. is actually maneuvering Israel into a position that is going to become absolutely untenable. following 9/11, with the seeding of and fomenting of all these wars in the Middle East, and concomitant with, all this negative publicity about the Jewish state's treatment of the Palestinians. Where you couple these two issues, and you end up in a situation where Israel is more and more being viewed as a perpetrator, as a negative force, and along with this, with all these fomenting of the wars, Israel is being put at more and more risk. And the fact, as I see it, is that, for example, in August of 2013, there was an alleged gas attack in Damascus. And the first thing that Obama was going to do was go in and bomb Syria. We've got to bomb Syria because they gassed all these people. Now, I did write an article at that time because emails surfaced indicating that the gas attack was bogus and that it was launched by the U.S. government. And that research is solid. Now, if the U.S. is going to create scenarios where it's going to attack Syria, when Syria has vowed that if you attack us, we're going to bomb Israel. Okay, you have a situation here that's called let's you and him fight. Okay, so you create a scenario.
I like that, you and them fight.
Where you put, okay, we're going to go in there and we're going to mess up Syria because Syria says we're going to attack Israel. And you create the situation where and put the blame for a situation on Syria where it is clearly not a situation that is absolutely clear that Syria did this. The indications are that the U.S. had a strong hand in that gas attack, and there are even questions whether that gas attack was not staged. So why would the U.S. continue to put its ally Israel at such grave risk?
Right, and that would be the big question, right.
Now, Putin stepped in there and diplomatically resolved that situation. Syria, he invited Syria, we've got to get Syria into the Chemical Weapons Convention, and that way we'll control the situation. And, Putin did an incredible job there in derailing that war. And then what happens like a year and a half later? Oh, we've got ISIS now. ISIS is operating in Syria. We've got to go in and bomb the ISIS facilities in Syria. So there is an effort, and there's so many questions about the genesis of ISIS, who's really funding them. I mean, there have been analyses done of some of those videos, which really call into question whether, these assassinations and beheadings are even happening. There's so much question going on. But once again, the U.S. is dead set on going in and creating a situation in Syria where Assad may very well stand up and say, I'm going to do what I said. I'm going to go there and bomb Israel. Now, Israel is tiny, and the fact that Israel's great ally, America, keeps putting Israel into situations that put that state at great risk also raises questions as to motive. And there was a groundbreaking book published in the 90s by a former Department of Justice prosecutor named John Loftus called The Secret War Against the Jews. Loftus had access to, because of his position in the government, all of these secret files that, we mere mortals can't see. And, the book is a very disturbing accounting of repeated sabotage by portions within the U.S. government of the Jewish state. Now, I know this is very unpopular to say right now. I mean, basically, we have two scenarios which appear to be where people are pitching their tents in terms of Israel. Either, the U.S. is an ally of Israel and we have to support Israel no matter what. That's one camp.
Right.
The other camp is, the state of Israel is doing these horrendous things in terms of the Palestinians, and we need to sanction Israel. And the fact is that there may be a meta platform here to look at the situation. And I believe that the so-called alliance and friendship between the U.S. and Israel may not be actually at this point valid. It's not a popular thing to say, but it does go with the concerns, the mounting eugenics concerns. And I do want to say, my concerns are not only for Semitic peoples. We have massive issues going on in Africa now in terms of, biological issues. Africa's almost being cleaned out by AIDS. We have the recent Ebola crisis. We have the escalating numbers of people suffering from the silent killers of hypertension and diabetes, which is largely afflicting people of color and people in Africa. All these issues may have less than natural roots. And there is substantiating documentation that all these issues of biological concerns in Africa, the ones I named, may have less than natural roots. And then you couple that again, you go back to the domestic policy in the U.S. and you see, all these police killings, and I believe there's well over 1,000 a year now. Police killings of citizens in the U.S. are largely either people of color or people who are considered mentally ill. And the police are being continually now exonerated. There's almost no prosecutions of police for killing Black people or mentally ill people. Again, we have the disability issue, all of which I think goes back to a master race agenda. So I think there are populations that are at risk. And I am attempting to, advance this thesis through my book.
Well, I guess then you say it's a misnomer for those people who say that the United States is really a Jewish state in a way, or is heavily influenced by the Jewish state.
Well, you said Jewish state, and this brings up another question, and it gets, there is the state, as in, there's the state of Israel, and then there's the Jewish people. And
Right.
Similarly, we have the state of the United States, and then we have the American people. Now, we're increasingly seeing governments acting without the best interests of their population at heart. We certainly have growing segments within the U.S. population which are just aghast at the policies that are being promoted by our government. And personally, I think that we have a similar situation in Israel. I am not in any way convinced or comfortable with the idea that the government in Israel is protecting the interests of those residing within its borders, whether they're Palestinians or whether they're Jews. Now, I think we have an accumulation of power in the hands of a very few people who are Jews, Christians, Muslims, whatever, okay? And these people may have allegiance to each other rather than allegiance to whom they are purporting to represent.
Right. Well,
this is my concern.
Yeah. Let's fast forward to something very current. Netanyahu is urging the United States to be more forceful, even militarily forceful, against Iran in developing nuclear weapons. And I find it strange that one country would be encouraging another country to take action, including military action, against another country on their behalf. What is your take on that? I mean, it just doesn't ring to me at all. And I'm not anti-Semitic or any of that stuff. I mean, I'm Italian and I belonged to a Jewish fraternity when I was in college. And not only that, but I actually worked with the Jewish garment district in New York. So, I mean, I have a lot of Jewish friends and a whole bit. And I don't play that game at all, believe me, not at all.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
But when I hear that, I just, it just sends chills up and down my spine. I almost get
Yeah,
angry.
it
I get
should.
really angry when I see that. And whether it be him or the French or the Argentinians, I don't care who says that. It's the same principle. What is your take on that?
Well, I think once again, Iran has behaved in a threatening manner verbally towards Israel. And there have also been, statements made, not sure so much by the current government, but certainly by past leaders in Iran that if you execute military action on our soil, we're going to retaliate against Israel. So once again, you have a situation where, Netanyahu may be collaborating with the destruction of his own country. Okay, this is what it comes down to. I mean, I just said it, okay? I am not convinced that the leadership of Israel has the best interests of its citizenry at heart. And that includes the Jews as well as the Palestinians. So if Netanyahu is also poking, we have two countries now which are sort of threatening Israel specifically and verbally, both Syria and Iran. And if Netanyahu is poking, Iran in a manner in which they promised also to attack Israel, I think it becomes fairly clear.
To me, it's
got leaders who are working for each other. We have enormous amounts of drama going on in the international scene, but it depends on the lens through which you look at it. Okay, and if you adopt the thesis that certain races have got to go, and that the leaders, we got a black man sitting in the presidency of the U.S. while the police are killing black people in the U.S. with complete impunity.
Right, I know. Well, it to me, it just seems it's manipulative or mind control or whatever. It's just so. If you look geographically, you can see the map behind me. I'll tell you that if you look at Israel, Israel is one of the smallest countries in the world geographically. I mean, I can bicycle across Israel in one day. I mean, if I didn't get shot, by somebody for doing so. But okay, thank you. And Iran is it's a much larger country. It would be practically, it's impossible, physically impossible for Iran to attack Israel without killing a horrendous number of Arabs. Now, I know Iranians are not Arabs; they're Persians, and we have to understand that. But still, they're almost on the same side. And obviously, even if they did have a sneak attack and they had a nuclear weapons and they perpetrated against Israel has the fourth largest air force in the world. They have I forgot the number of F-16s they have. They have the largest fleet of F-16 fighter jets. Iran would be toast within 24 hours. I mean, from a tactical and military point of view, it is practically impossible for Iran to attack Israel and live, basically. And so I to me, this is verbiage that borders on propaganda and mind control. And it just bothers me that you have something that's so impractical that we want to believe it after a while.
Let me raise a question here, okay? Back on September 11th of 2001, allegedly, Saudi hijackers drove planes into buildings,
right,
evading all of the incredible technology, the fighters that should have been scrambled, the radar, I mean, everything that has been put into place to protect that. Now, there was obviously a stand-down order. Now, once again, you have to look at the leadership. What the scenario that you constructed concerning Iran and Israel is only valid if the person, sends off the attacking force. Now, what happened in the U.S. on September 11th, 2001 boggles the mind, because the U.S. has the capability to get, basically stop that in its tracks.
That's correct.
Just like the Iran-Israel scenario that you just presented. The question is, there has to be a person at the top making that decision and pressing the button. Obviously, that didn't happen in the U.S. And since we're dealing with a leadership problem,
Right.
not the problem of the populace and the citizenry, but the leaders who are making the decisions, we don't know what could happen,
Yeah.
Joe. We don't know if we don't know.
Janet, we have a
Leaders
caller
are
on.
not
Janet, excuse
Go
me.
ahead.
We have a caller. We want to take the call. I want to make one comment before we put the caller on. I still don't understand the arithmetic. We have fighter jets at Mach 2, and it took them an hour and 35 minutes to go 35 miles. The arithmetic doesn't add up. Let's take a call, please. Caller, you're on the air. Your first name and where you're calling from, please.
Hi, my name is Pat. I'm from Okmulgee, and I wanted to ask back on the subject of Mr. Netanyahu. I know he was popularly elected recently. What is the attitude of the Israeli populace to the way he is managing the response to the negotiations with Iran?
Excellent question.
Is the Israeli populace behind Mr. Netanyahu? And I will take my answer off the air. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for listening in, Pat. Appreciate it. Good question.
It's a good question. I'm not an Israeli. Not sure about that. I will say, when Netanyahu was reelected, there are Israeli travelers who come through here in San Cristobal, and I did speak with some about that because I was quite surprised. And the response that I got was that people in Israel are basically security conscious. So,
That's right,
Netanyahu, as opposed to the gentleman running against him, presents the strong, aggressive, hawk-like force, and that the Israelis went with that, essentially out of security concerns.
Yep.
So, as far as the reaction to the Iran deal, I'm not able to answer that question.
Okay.
Are you, Joe?
Excuse me?
Are you? Do you have any thoughts on that? I don't.
Well, I subscribe to probably the person who would have been the best a Secretary of State of the United States, and that was my mother. She was a stay-at-home mom. She didn't even drive a car. She stayed home and she took care of the family. Very old-fashioned, an absolute angel on earth. There wasn't one person who didn't think she was an absolute angel. And when my father used to rail about political situations, because he was from Europe, and he was always talking about the political situation here and there, and she used to listen to him rant, and after he finished, she would conclude the conversation with these words, and these exact words. She'd say, "Victor, if people would only stay home and mind their own business, the world would be a better place." That's my answer. I wish everyone would just stay home and mind their own business and stop thinking in nation state mentality and start thinking about person to person and how we can all help each other out. I don't care if you're black, white, yellow, green. I don't care. I don't care where you're from or anything. We're all the same. We had a fellow last week talk about exceptionalism in the United States, and I said, the only thing I find exceptional are people themselves. And I really wish we would think more along those lines. We have a caller, you're on the line. Your first name and where you're calling from, please.
Elliot Bernstein, calling from Boca Raton, Florida.
Boca Raton, very good. How's the weather there?
It's beautiful.
Okay, great. Okay, your question or your comment, please.
My comment is, when you start with a case like Janet's and you're looking at this in a microcosm versus a macro, And if you step back and say, why is Janet a victim of this? You search backwards almost. What has happened in the United States and elsewhere, mostly formerly Axis countries or the new state of Israel, what we appear to be suffering from is a coup d'etat in our governments by, let's call them the Fourth Reich, not naming them particularly as German Nazis, but American Nazis, fascists, whatever you want to call them, Israeli fascists who might be former Nazis, and a whole slew of Nazis, 6 million, I allege, that were paperclip new identities of the camp people that were murdered and moved into countries like the United States, Israel, and elsewhere, who have slowly and methodically been destroying the one thing that stands in the way of a total world control, which is the United States and our stupid Constitution, that damn little thing that keeps getting in the way because it gives people rights.
It gets in the way,
so
right?
Slowly but surely since World War II, they have been, and by the way, this really can go back to the Nazis, we'll call them, of Skull and Bones, who were primary architects of the Nazi Party and funders, the Bushes, etc., the Cheneys, who are all members of Skull and Bones, who have hated this country's freedoms to the people, the power of the people, tried to align with the Nazis in the business plot, which was foiled by Smedley Darlington Butler. And since World War II ended, they needed a new host country for the Reich, and we became it. And these Nazis poured into this country. Werner von Braun, head of the NASA, the AMA head was a Nazi. All paperclip these nice new identities, hidden their war crimes, etc., new names. You don't know who they are. They could be the judge in your case. They could be a prosecutor. They could be all of these people trying to disable our rights. And that is what you're seeing. Right now, what we're seeing, and you say that the American people are asleep or, they're not all taking action. Well, first of all, I'd like to, say that I've been instrumental in making 99% of the people of the world aware of the 1%'s crimes against them. My technologies I invented, which allow for internet video to be streamed, two-way, low-bandwidth communication, such as your face chat or your Skype, all those technologies come from inventions of mine, which have exposed this global conspiracy and brought it to the populace and turned it to a 99% versus 1.
All right,
Now,
Corley, you'll have to wrap it up. We only have about 30 seconds to go, please.
Excuse me?
We have about 30 seconds to go. If you could please wrap it up, I'd appreciate it.
Oh, okay. We're in a global takedown of governments to create a world order controlled by 1% nutcase, mostly primarily former Nazis who have infiltrated.
All right. We'll take that. We'll take that. All right. We'll take that as your conclusion. I want to thank you very much for listening in. Thank you so much for your comments. And Janet, we only have about a minute to go. So if you would just give us a 30-second response to what you just heard, if you want, and then tell our listeners something about your book, where they can find your book, and some of your articles in reaching you.
Right. I was very interested in what Mr. Bernstein had to say, and I think in a lot of his analysis, he is right on the button. And I as a private person, I had some difficulty, and as a reporter who is trained to write about objective external things, writing my book Exile was actually quite a detour from me and actually a little difficult to do. But I felt that it was important to expose what had happened to my family and to get this into the public mix due to, the obvious threat to civilian populations in the U.S. The book is Exile. It is right now only available at thebookpatch.com. So you can order it online. They will print it and send it to you. And you can find my most recent articles. I'm currently writing for New Eastern Outlook, which is a dual English-Russian language online publication published out of Moscow, Russia. So my articles, current articles at New Eastern Outlook, and the book is Exile.
There it is. Okay, very good.
There it is.
Janet, I want to thank you so much for being. You are a wonderful guest, very insightful. We certainly appreciate it. I promise I will finish that book. I'll be working on it this evening. Okay, and in fact, I'll be driving to Austin, Texas tomorrow, and my wife will probably be driving, so I'll be reading the book while she's driving. Okay, thank you so much, and I hope you would accept our invitation to maybe return at a later date once again.
Thank you so much, Joe. It's really been a pleasure.
Same here. Thank you so much. Okay. Folks, thank you very much for listening in. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the financial support, and we'd like to thank you for listening in. You can further the cause of liberty by recommending this program to your friends, but let us hear from you. Our email address is comments@libertytalkradio.com. Remember, as my wife would say, you are either allowing your liberties to be taken away or you're striving to protect them. Unfortunately, there is no middle ground. Until next time, I'm Joe Cristiano. You've been listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Stay well. Stay tuned.